Good afternoon to my colleagues and to the tourism candidates and to the parents that are listening on behalf of their learners so that they can assist them. I'm just here to give you exam tips for the paper that will be written on Thursday. And I am TD Mafoyane. So I'll be addressing both the candidates, because now we call them candidates, and the teachers, my colleagues. Let me start with you, candidates. One study tip that I would like to give to you is that your environment where you study is very much important, even before we come to the content or the resources or anything that you'll be using to study. Find a go-to-study place. Make sure that there's a place where you study at. I know that some of the candidates or some of the learners are in camps, they are at school, so you'll find a place where you can study. But if you are studying at home, make sure that you find a very quiet space. And then also remember that you cannot read your textbook or in your notes or your study guides the same way you check your Facebook page. That is totally different. I know that in most cases you remember what you see on Facebook more than what you read from their textbook. It depends on the strategy that you use. I know that most of you are visual learners. That is why it is easy for you to remember what you see more than what you have read. So for the information that you have read to stay there, you have to process it until you get it. That is the tip that I'm giving you. Learn, relearn, and learn again until you master the content or the skill. So make sure that you are focused, because if you lose focus, you will not be able to process the information. Put your mind to what you are trying to learn or grasp. Do not think about your friends or other things when you are studying. When you put in effort to understand something, you are signaling your brain that the information is worth remembering. So that is why I'm saying, make sure that you put very much effort into what you are doing. And if you do that, the results will show. So when you prepare for your exam, you need a number of resources. So for tourism, you need your textbook. It doesn't mean that at this point of time, the textbook you cannot use. You still need to use the textbook, refer to pictures that are in the textbook, and then also use the DBE self-study guides that were provided, whether you have a hard copy or a visual one, a soft copy. So use the DBE self-study guides. And what is also important is the 2021 examination guideline. And that is the guideline that I'll be using more than other resources in my presentation. And also use the previous question papers. But remember that when you use the previous question papers, especially in tourism, it does not mean that you'll get the very same scenario, the very same pictures or cartoons. In the next paper, you are going to get totally different resources or sources. That is why it is important for you to make sure that you don't memorize what is in the question paper. And you also need a notepad or a notebook where you will jot down as you read. And then for some of the learners, especially those that are in camps, or if you do have friends, make sure that you do participate in the study groups. And then when you get into exam room on Thursday, please arrive 30 minutes before time. Have your stationery that is needed, especially a calculator. In tourism, some of the learners, they tend to forget the calculator, and it creates problem when you do your calculation, especially when you do the currency conversions. So make sure that you do have a calculator. So when you are in the exam room, please be calm. Be calm, do not panic. If you feel that you have that anxiety, take a deep breath, breathe in and breathe out, and you will be calm. You'll start relaxing. And then also, as soon as we receive the question paper, still do not panic. Just peruse the question paper before you read. And then read all the headings and the instructions carefully. Engage with resources. You know that a tourism paper is full of resources. Engage with the case studies, the extracts that are in the question paper, the graphs, the maps, cartoons, pictures, flowcharts, and infographics. And the currency table and word clouds, because you are definitely going to get a currency table. And then study those resources and the questions. What is the resource about? What is it telling you? And what part of knowledge does that resource relate to? Make sure that your handwriting is so neat, because if your handwriting is not legible, it makes it possible for the person that will be marking your script to read what you have written. Now, let us come to the preparation when you prepare to answer the questions. Remember that the exam is meant to prove for you, it's meant for you to prove that you have mastered the content and the skills that were taught. And also, it is this question paper or this exam that will help you to acquire quality results and also to improve your levels. Because remember, you need those levels for your points when you go to tertiary. So when you read, remember that you need to study hard so that you can improve the quality of your results. So this is the structure of the tourism paper. Tourism paper is a 3-hour paper, and it is out of 200 marks. The question paper is divided into 5 compulsory sections, meaning that we have to answer all questions. In tourism, we don't choose, but we answer all, except for the multiple choice question. And then section A, in section A, there's only one question, and section A has only short questions, and it covers all topics. When I say all topics, I mean everything. And the total mark for question 1 is 40 marks. And section B has 2 sections. It's question 2 and question 3, map work and tour planning, and question 3 is foreign exchange. And the total mark for section B is 50 marks. And then section C has 3 questions, question 4, 5, and 6. Question 4 is tourism attractions, and then question 5, it will be cultural and heritage tourism, and question 6 is marketing. And question C also counts 50 marks. Section D, it has 2 questions, question 7 and 8. Question 7 is tourism sectors, and question 8 is sustainable and responsible tourism. And that section is out of 30 marks. Section E, it has 2 questions. Question 9, domestic, regional, and international tourism. And the last question, which is question 10, is communication and customer care, and that section is out of 30. So now let's go to section A. In section A, expect it's short questions, remember, and then expect multiple choice question, matching items, which is the column where you have to where you get column A and column B, and then you'll have to match items that are in column A with maybe the items that are in column B. And then you'll also be expected to choose correct words from the options given, give the correct terms, and then the questions will be based on map work, the graphs, mind maps, pictures, tourism logos, cartoons, infographics. Like I said, that you are going to get resources that are based on infographics and word clouds. So remember that in tourism, we don't do true or false questions. So do not practice any, do not revise or use any resource or any question that has true or false questions, because you are not going to get that in the examination. And then I know that there's a belief that section A or short questions are the easiest questions, but this section cannot necessarily be considered the easy part of the paper, because you might find questions where you still have to do calculations. The question still has high order and medium order questions. So, and when you prepare for section A, remember that you might be assessed on sections or topics from the previous grades, from grade 10 and grade 11. So also remember or recall what you have learned in grade 10, grade 11. To cite an example, types of tourists and the sectors in the tourism industry are done in grade 10, but you might get a question where you'll be asked maybe to give the type of a tourist from a statement that is given. So it is important also to remember what you learned. As you study, you check what is related to the previous, to the content of the previous grade. And then again, from the moderator's report, this is the findings. And fortunately, I'm the moderator, so I'm the one who writes the moderator's report. So what we have discovered as we do our marking at the end of the year is that some of the learners have a tendency of skipping questions and numbering their responses incorrectly. This leads to a loss of marks because of the correct responses which will not be written on the appropriate or relevant question number. Like most cases, question 1, it will be question 1.1 as multiple choice question, and question 1.1.1 will be the question. So some of the learners will start writing their answers from where they write 1.1 instead of 1.1.1, and that creates a problem. And there are still learners who will skip questions, especially when they move to the next page or the next sheet of the answer book. They will skip questions. Make sure that you don't skip questions. Even if you are not sure about the answer, I'm not encouraging guesswork, but all I'm advising is that even if you don't know the answer, just guess, because that might be the correct answer. And then let me just give you some few tips on how to answer the multiple choice questions. The first one is that keep the numbering of the answers the same as it is in the question paper, as I've cited that some of the learners do get that wrong. And then try to work out the answer without looking at the possibilities. Try to have to get to the answer even before you look at the possible answers that are given. And then read through the statement and all options. You underline the keywords in the sentence where the question is phrased, and then cross out the options that are definitely wrong, so that you start eliminating the wrong answers. And then read through the statement again, and then select the most appropriate option from the options remaining. And then you write down the answer, and remember, section A, we write the letters of the correct answer, not the answer in full. So write the letter of the correct answer. And then from there, after that, you go back. If maybe you are not sure, you just go back. And then if you still have time, go back and then read through your answers to check if you selected the correct answer. Another advice, never leave a question unanswered when you answer the multiple choice question. And then let's move to the next part, which also sometimes we will experience learners losing marks in multiple choice, in match questions. When you approach the match questions, read through the entire list of statements in column A and all the description in column B. Read through each statement in column A and find the best match in column B. Tick off the answers in column B in pencil so that you know that that one has already been chosen. And then cross out the options that are definitely wrong. You cross the wrong answers. And then first do the ones you are sure of, and then you go back to the ones that you are not sure of. And then do not guess your answers. Like I've said, that we don't encourage guesswork. You don't start by guessing. But if you cannot get to the correct answer, that is when you can gas. And then let's move to the next section, which is section B. And the topic for section B is map work and tour planning. So in this question, you will be expected to answer questions on tour plans, route planning, compiling a day-by-day itinerary, compiling a tour budget, health, safety, and travel documentation, world time zones, and calculation of world times when traveling between countries. When it comes to the tour plans and the route planning, and that is the content, remember the content that you did in grade 11. Go back and then revise the day-by-day itinerary, and also remember what you learned when you were doing the practical assessment task. Because some of the questions some of the content that was assessed in the practical assessment task might also be assessed in the November exam. So it is important to go back to the practical assessment task. So the most challenging part in this section or this question, in question 2, is the calculation of the world time zones. Do not worry about that. I will be assisting you on how to do the calculations. So question 2, like I've said, that time zone is a monster to most of the learners, but now of late, because we've done a lot of training, I know that now learners are beginning to excel in this topic where they have to calculate the time zone. And then from the moderator's report, these are the findings. There are learners who struggle with the interpretation of the case study when responding to the time zone questions. Remember that time zone questions, they start with a case study. So go through that case study, read that case study carefully, and then underline the times that are given and the places of question and the places where the time is given in that case study before you even go to the questions. So another concern is that learners, they do not know when to subtract or when to add when calculating the time zone difference. I'll also explain that later on. And another finding was that there are learners who struggle to determine the time of the place in question. Like if they're asked, like the time for South Africa will be given, and learners will be asked to give the time of New York. And instead of learners giving the time of, when they have to give the time for New York, learners will struggle. They don't know whether they have to struggle to subtract the time difference or to add the time difference to the time of South Africa. So that is another area where I'll be assisting you with. And then another struggle is that there are still learners who struggle to calculate the arrival or the departure time of the flight. So that is very much important when you do time zone, the calculations. And learners, they don't know whether they have to subtract or they have to add the flight time that is given in the case study. So some learners, they still use the 12-hour clock instead of the 24-hour clock, which leads to incorrect way of writing the time in tourism. I will show you how we write time in tourism later on. I was just giving you the feedback from the moderator's report. And then from the examination guideline, it is said that the time zone map provided with this guideline should be used for the interpretation and understanding of the time zone. This simply means that you cannot use the time zone map from any other resource except the time zone that is in the previous question papers or the one that is in the examination guideline. Remember that the time zone map that is in your textbook, some is colorful, so the one that you are going to get at the end of the year is not colorful, and that might influence your calculation or interpretation when you have to calculate, especially the time zone difference or the difference in hours. And then in the examination guideline, it is also stated that learners are not required to know which countries apply the daylight saving time. And the acronym for the daylight saving time is DST. However, from the given scenarios or the table that you might get, they must be able to determine, you must be able to determine whether to apply the daylight saving time or not. In most cases, in the scenario, or maybe even at the beginning of the question, there will be a statement which says, New York apply daylight saving time. So it is important to note such, so that when you do the calculations, you will remember that you have to apply the daylight, the DST. And then again, you must understand the impact of the time zone and the daylight saving time on travel planning and on traveling. Remember that the time in South Africa is different from the time in New York, and New York applies daylight saving time. So if you travel during the time when New York is practicing daylight saving time, it means that you will have to move your clock an hour ahead, because New York has already applied their daylight saving time. So it means that by the time when you leave South Africa, that will have an impact on your travel planning and even your traveling. That is why we also do the impact or the jet lag, how it affects our traveling. And when you do the calculations, always show all calculations when you write down your answer. The reason being that if your final answer is incorrect, at least you can get marks for the other steps. So these are the steps that we use in tourism. I know that in other subjects like Maths Lit, they also do time calculations or time zones calculations, but in tourism, these are the steps that we use. In the first step, you are expected to calculate the time zone difference. I prefer to say difference in hours, because the answer that you have to give there should be in hours, not as the time. And then the second step is where you have to calculate the time of the place in question, as I've explained previously. And then step 3 is where you calculate either the departure time or the arrival time. And then in the fourth step, provided that the place, the places or one of the places in the question is practicing daylight saving time, it means that then your fourth step will be where you calculate the daylight saving time. And then I know that in other schools or some teachers will prefer to start with the daylight saving time as their first step, but I prefer that learners should use the daylight saving time in the fourth step, because these are the steps that we follow when we are at the marking center. The answers or the responses in the examination guideline, they follow the same steps. And the last step, which is the fifth step, that's where you have to determine the time, provided the question requires you to give the date. Sorry, not the time, but the date. Remember, I said we are using the 24-hour clock. So this is how we write the clock. I know that in the past, our parents used to use a digital clock, and a digital clock that has something where like there will be 2 dots that are like popping in and out. So I usually, when I teach this time zone calculation, I always say it's like your clock. It's there's a term like, it's like when you close and open your eyes. We are saying in our local language, street language, we say wapanya panya. So I always teach learners that you must remember that when you write your time, it will be like if the time it is 9:30 in the evening, you don't say 9:30 or 9 p.m. You don't even use the PMs to avoid the confusion between. The reason why we use the 24-hour clock is to avoid the confusion between the AMs and the PMs. So this is how we write the time. You will write 22:1 and then that sign, the panya sign. Like, remember that your time has to open and close its eyes. That's what I usually say, because if you write H there, you are not going to get a mark. That's where learners lose mark for writing the time incorrectly. So it will be 21, panya, 30. That is 9:30 in the evening. That's how I prefer, so that you always remember that your clock needs to panya to open and close its eyes, even though we know that the clock does not have eyes. And then remember that you will only use the time zone map that is in the question paper. And even when you use when you start doing the calculations, do not use the calculator. Instead, use the clock that is on the map. There's a clock that will be on the left side of the map. Instead of you doing the calculations, use that clock. For an example, if you have to, maybe the time of the place where you have to calculate from, it is 08 panya 00, ne? So you'll put your finger at 8, and then maybe the time difference for the other between the two places is 10 hours, and you are calculating the time of the place that is ahead of the GMT or ahead of the place where you are at. So it means that from 8, you'll put your finger on the clock at 8, and then you move forward 10 times, and that will take you to your answer, instead of you using the calculator. But there are those wise learners that maybe if the answer, when they do their calculations, the time is 35, they will be able to say 35 minus 24, and then they will get to the answer, and knowing that it will be the answer for the next date. And then again, the time zone map will show that the time zones of the places. One thing that you need to be careful of is that at the top of the time zone, that's where the time zones are written, where it will be from the GMT line, the 0 degree line of longitude, which we call it the UTC, Universal Time Coordination, or the GMT. From that 0 degree line going to your right or to the east, it starts with +1 and then +2. And we all know that South Africa is at +2. And if you look at South Africa, where South Africa is located, it is gray shaded on the map. And also +2 there at the top, it is gray shaded. So it is very much important that if maybe in a multiple choice question, you are asked to give the time zone of a certain place, make sure that the time zone where the place is located, the time zone, the color also is the same as where the time zone is written. Like if you look at where Cape Town is located on the map, Cape Town is located in the ocean. The name is written in the ocean, and where it is written, if you take your finger up to where the time zones are written, it will take you to a +1. But where Cape Town is located, it is in the land, and the land is gray shaded. That is another tip that I'm giving you, so that when you are asked to locate places, you don't miss that. And what I just explained, that you need to know your time zone line. Know that the places that are on the western side, they carry a negative sign, so it will be a -1, -2 time zone. And also know the degree of longitude. A place like from a place that is at 15 degrees west, it is the time zone of that place will be a -1. From the GMT moving towards the east, I said the next time zone from the 0 degree will be a +1, and that degree there, the degree of longitude there, it will be 15 degrees east. So you also need to know that. And also remember that the places that are ahead of the GMT will have a later date, a time than those that are behind the GMT. So now let's come to the calculations. The first step, remember I said the first step is where you calculate the difference in hours. Ne? So the tip here is that I have two methods that are there for those that will be using the Facebook and your YouTube. The first method is where you have to establish whether the two places they carry the same sign, looking at the time zone. If they carry the same sign, you subtract. Like if it is a +2 and a +8, then it means you have to subtract. For an example, the time zone for Cape Town, it will be a +2, and then for Johannesburg, it will be a +2, and then for Sydney, let's say it's a +2. It means that you are going to subtract 2 from 8, and then you'll get, 2 from 10, and then you'll get 8. And then if the two places carry the different signs, one is a +2 and the other one is a -5, like Cape Town is a +2, New York is a -5, then it means that you'll add the 2 and then you get to your 7. Another method is where you look at the position, looking at your compass. If the two places are in the eastern side, then you add. If one is on the eastern side and one on the western side, then you subtract. Then the second step is where you calculate the time of the place in question. There you just check whether moving from the place where the time is given to the place of the time in question, whether you have to do a forward movement or a backward movement. So if you move from the place where the time is given to the time of the place in question, and then you make a forward movement, you are going to add. And then if you move from a place where the time is given to a place where the time is not given, then you make a backward movement, you are going to subtract. And then another method is just to check whether you move from the west to the east, if you move from a place where the time is given to a place where the time is not given. So if you move from west to east, you add, from east to west, then you subtract. And then another example, third step is where you calculate the arrival time. And then calculating the arrival time, you cannot calculate the arrival time or the departure time without the flight time. The flight time will be given in the scenario. So if you calculate the question requires you to calculate the arrival time, it means you are going to add. You are going to add the flight time to the answer that you got in the previous step, the step 2. And then if you have to calculate the departure time, it means that you are going to subtract the flight time to the answer that you got in the previous step. And then the last step is where the fourth step is where you calculate the daylight saving time. And when you calculate the daylight saving time, you just check if you are calculating from a place that is practicing to a place that is not practicing. So if you are calculating from a place that is practicing to a place that is not practicing, it means that you are going to subtract. But if you calculate from a place that is not practicing to the one that is practicing the daylight saving time, you are going to add. By adding, it's only because we are just moving our clock an hour ahead. So if both places are not practicing the daylight saving time, you do nothing. You don't need to add or subtract the daylight saving time. The daylight saving time, it is in 1 hour. And then another thing, if the two places are also practicing, you don't need to subtract anything. You just keep your answer as you got it from the previous step. And remember that DST is 1 hour. When we move, our clock is either an hour ahead or an hour backwards. And then the date, you check that as you were doing your calculations around the clock, did you cross the 00 Panyapa or the 24 hours, moving forward or backward? If you cross that moving forward, it means that you have moved to the next date. If you cross that moving backwards, it means that you moved to the previous date. So if you do not cross, you keep the date as it is. And I advise that you write the date, like write the date in full. Like today, it is the 21st of November. Write November, especially the month in full, because sometimes you might, instead of writing 11, you might mistake that to be a 10, and then you lose marks. And then let me now take you to question 3, foreign exchange. So the findings from the moderator's report was that most learners, they struggle with currency conversions. They don't know whether to add or subtract, when to divide or multiply. Remember that when we're doing time zones, we spoke several times about adding and subtracting. When it comes to currency conversion, it's either you divide or you multiply. And some of the learners, they don't know whether to use the bank buying rate or the bank selling rate when they do these calculations. And then some of the learners, they lose marks by not rounding off. So because of time, let me just take you straight to how we do the calculations. Firstly, when you do the currency conversions using the bank buying rates and the bank selling rate, remember that for you to understand the difference between the bank buying rate and the bank selling rate, you need to take that from the bank's position. What is the bank doing? Is the bank selling a foreign currency, or is the bank buying a foreign currency? And always the bank buying rate will always be lower than the bank selling rate, because the bank has to do commission, and then the bank selling rate will be the highest. So this is how we do our currency conversions. At first, if you read the scenario again, or the case study, the scenario. When you read the scenario, you need to establish whether you have to convert a foreign currency to a local currency or a local currency to a foreign currency. So if the amount given is in rands, it means that you have a local currency, which is the rand, and then you have to convert that to a foreign currency. There you are going to divide. Usually I say to the learners, when we divide, remember the smile, division, relate the division sign to the smile, so that your S for the smile can rhyme with the S for the bank selling rate. So when you divide using the bank selling rate. And then sometimes from the scenario, you might find that the amount that you have to convert, it is in a foreign currency. So it means that you'll be having a foreign currency which you have to convert to a local currency, and our local currency is rands. So in this case, when you have a foreign currency and then you have to convert that to rands, you are going to multiply. Usually I say to my learners, remember the butler door, that the butler doors prevents thieves from coming. So you block your thieves from coming in. So if you have a foreign currency and then you have to convert to a local currency, you butler that, you multiply using the bank buying rate. So the bank buying rate, the B will rhyme with the multiplication sign. You know that you butler. So when you have to cross, you use the bank buying rate. And then question 4 is on attractions and icons. And I know that sometimes we regard this as an easy question when we do our study. But when it comes to answering questions, this is also not an easy question. So make sure that you only study the icons prescribed for 2022. There's a list there. It is in the examination guidelines. Because of time, I will not go through all the icons like your Mount Fuji, the Dome of the Rock, the Taj Mahal, please, the windmill, the Mount Everest, please study that. So when you study the icons, study different images, different pictures, because we're not going to get the same picture. And also study the location of the icons. Where are the icons located? First, start with the country where they are located, then move to the city. And also, where are they located on a map? Because you might be given a map, and then you have to state the icon that is located at that point on the map. And then again, like I said, use the DBE study guides when you revise this. Know the reason why the icons are regarded as icons. After knowing their location, know the reasons why they are icons, and then also be able to give short descriptions. So studying the structure also, the features of the icons will help you to do to be able to describe those icons. Also know the types of tourists that will visit them. And then also study what happens around and in that attraction, and also how can the attractions or icons be protected. That is also important. And as you study this topic also, remember not to confuse factors that contribute to the success of a tourist attraction or icon and the characteristics of a successful tourist attraction. The factors simply say what contributes, what makes an attraction to be a successful icon. But the characteristics is where you have to state the characteristics. How do we identify that this is a successful attraction? Question 5 is on culture and heritage. The same applies with the heritage sites. Ne? Know where the heritage site, know the images of the, any image or anything that you can use to know those, the heritage sites, where are they located. But in this instance, you need to know the province where they are located, and even the town where they are located. And then also it is important to study the UNESCO and also the criteria why these places were declared to be the World Heritage Sites. It is very much important. And this is also the content for grade 10. Like I said, it is important to know what is happening around the heritage sites. Question 5, marketing. And this is also another topic or question where learners do not do well. Please make it a point that you read all the marketing strategies. Know South African tourism and the role in marketing South Africa, the role of SA tourism in marketing South Africa. Please know that. It is very much important. Know the concepts also related to the topic. Your core markets, your emerging markets, you need to know that. And who funds, you also need to know, in as much as you need to know the core business and even the brand image of SA tourism, you need to know the funding for marketing purpose. Who funds that, and the role of TOMSA and the TBCSA. It is very much important. And know the various platforms for marketing South Africa, your gate show, your World Trade Market, you need to know all that, your tourism indaba. And it is very much important, especially in our current era, to know the new travel trends, know the current events, know also the recovery plan, especially after COVID, because that also has affected our marketing strategies. Question 7 is about the tourism sectors. Tourism sectors is about professional image in the tourism industry, the condition of employment, and the purpose and the value of the code of conduct. So here you are going to get, it's either it can be a cartoon, it can be, or a case study. So it is very much important that as you read the case study and the cartoon very with that eye of saying, make it as if you are part of the incident that is in the scenario. Because if you can relate to the incident, maybe it is an incident about poor service delivery, and that is related to professional image. So in that case, if you can relate to the scenario, that will help you to answer the question. And then also use the DBE self-study guides. It will help you to revise this topic. And then question 8 is on sustainable and responsible tourism. And in most cases, learners do not study. I don't know what happens when you study the 3 pillars of sustainable tourism. You just read through or rushing, or what happens. Or when you get the case study also, you just read and then you don't relate that to what you studied at school or what you were taught. So as you go through this question, remember everything that you were taught, like your 3 pillars. I will come to the 3 pillars and relate what you have learned to the case study and the questions. Also, remember to revise and study the corporate social investment. That is important. And only if you can read the case study well, you'll be able to answer this question. Terminology and the concepts that you studied, especially when it comes to the triple bottom line, it is very much important to understand that. And in this question, you'll be expected to apply knowledge more than just reproducing knowledge. And then these are the 3 pillars. We have our people, profit, and planet. We have the 3 pillars in tourism, not 5 pillars like in other subjects. There are learners that will give other pillars that are in other subjects. So in tourism, we speak about only the 3 pillars, and people, we are referring to the social factors, planet, the environmental factors, and economy, the profit, the economic factors. And when you get scenario or a question, check if the statement or whatever that is related there, does it relate to the social factors or the people's pillar or the environment. It is very much important to do that. And then question 9 is on domestic, regional, and international tourism. So in this question, you are not required to study the events, like your global events. That's where we do the global events, unforeseen occurrences, and there you are not expected to study the World Cup, know everything about the World Cup, but how it impacts, how the events impact on tourism, whether it's domestic, regional, or international. So the current information and most recent events should be accessible from the media. So what I'm saying here is that some of the current events are not in your textbook. So it is important that you Google and then you read about the current events and the current information. And then how it impacts. And when you study how it impacts, also check whether how they impact the economy of the country or the society. It is also important to relate your responses to those factors also. And then the question also you get this question also you get the forms of payment when traveling internationally and the foreign market share. Please revise the graphs that you used when you were studying for your data handling task. Revise that because it will be based on stats, interpretation of stats. And then question 10, learners sometimes do well in this question. It's a question about communication and customer care, where you will be assessed on methods to obtain customer feedback and to measure customer satisfaction. So know even the recent information about how companies, they get feedback from their customers. And what is the main reason to get a feedback? What do the companies or the business use that information for? And then lastly, you'll be given, the question, you might get pictures or extracts or even cartoons where you'll have to answer questions based on that topic, and also refer or use the self-study guides for more information. In all the topics, we've been speaking about case studies and case studies. Let me just give you a tip on how to go about case studies. 1, look at the heading and the picture to get an idea of what the case study is all about. Read through the case study carefully and slowly with understanding. Read each question and underline the keywords and the verbs in the case study. Read the case study again and underline each of the keywords in the case study. Remember, I said the verbs only, so now read and underline the importance of keywords. The keywords will be the key concepts that you studied. And then from there, now you can go and then start answering the question, but pay special attention to the action verb of the question, because that is what is important. Look at the mark allocation also when you answer questions. And let me say this, everything starts with you learners. Every success or failure begins with you. If you are looking for someone who can change your life, that someone is you. Everything starts with your own mind. So exam preparation starts with you. So when you leave now to prepare for your exam, remember that it starts with you. Your attitude matters. I wish you the best luck in your exam, and I know that you are going to ace this coming exam. I really believe in you. So there's a competition, and I know that you are all going to win this competition. But now the challenge is that the prize is for only one person, and I don't know who's going to get that person, but you are all going to be winners. So the question is, what do you do when you have to apply the daylight saving time, when calculating from a place practicing the daylight saving time to a place that is not practicing the DST? That is the question. Let me repeat the question again. What do you do when you have to apply the daylight saving time when calculating from a place practicing the daylight saving time to a place that is not practicing? Thank you, winners.